Hey guys, it's Corey again, and today we're taking a look at the process post-call outcome sequence that I have, workflow, I guess it's called in Go High Level, and it is basically an asynchronous process where I'm firing off the calls in one workflow, and then letting Air, putting the names on a list, and Air's then calling. And once a call gets answered, then it triggers this response back to Go High Level. And we're catching that post-call outcome webhook right here in this trigger. So I won't go into that too much because that's been documented in some other videos and Air's website where they've got their documentation and all the details in there on that. I'm looking at this flow and then some of the things that I think are important. So I just have it wait for a minute, and I put this in here so I can set this really high if I want to back up traffic, so to speak, and do some testing. But that's the only reason that delay's there. The next thing to do that I'm doing right here is I'm switching the to and from phone. So if it happens to be, since these are campaigns, if it happens to be that all your calls are going out, that's good. So your outbound number is always if it's an outbound call, then the to number is the client. So one of the things that this will do is it's going to match up the data with the contacts in your CRM inside Go High Level. It'll match up the data with the name and the phone number that come back from Air, because Air will pass those back. But you've got to know which one it is, whether it's an outbound call or an inbound call. So it's possible that with a running campaign, that someone just makes an inbound call. And if they do an inbound call, then what it does is it switches the to and the from numbers switch roles. The client is actually on an inbound call, the from, and on an outbound call, they're the to. So what we have to do is we're just detecting whether or not it's, from the direction that's here, this direction contains outbound or inbound. And the reason I say contains outbound, I look for this because it's a substring. I don't know what other values it can take on, but I have seen outbound API, and the inbound seems to be consistently inbound. But if I do it this way and they throw in outbound this or outbound that or outbound whatever, this gives me a more robust solution. So I do contain. So it's a substring search in both of these cases and match. And it seems to be doing it insensitive to case. So we're not having to match it exact, but awful close. And then I've got just a catch-all right here. So that's a good thing to do is, maybe it has something that some other, who knows what kind of value, or maybe there's an error that comes across. In that case, what I want to do is I want to remove it from the calls workflow. I don't want to make any more calls. I want to remove the call. I had tagged it originally with call with Air over in the other piece of the architecture, which puts it on the list for an outbound call from Air. And then I want to increment the call counter. So I implemented a call counter on each contact so that I know how many times they've answered. If they answer, then that's a completed call cycle. Otherwise, I've put a request out there for Air to call, but if they never answer, if Air never shows it as answered, then this will not get incremented. That call it's just going to stay on that list and get called with the rules of Air. So if they do answer, then we increment this. We want to make sure that we're not just bugging somebody and having them answer multiple times. So I'll use this call counter a little bit later, but I increment it. I just, back in the day, it's just plus, but it's a read, modify, write of the call counter, and then I remove it from the flow over here. So that's just a default. That's just a catch-all default, and hopefully it never runs. I don't really have any statistics on how much this is going to run in the future. Like I won't know if it does run necessarily. I just have it do the right thing, which is to remove that call because we can't determine correctly the phone number. If we can't determine the phone number correctly, inbound or outbound, we're going to screw that up with the contact, and we're not going to properly tag the contact up. And I don't know, it's this is just a catch-all. So the difference between these two functions right here is the only difference is what they use for the to number and the from number, how they use them. And we're only interested in the one, in this case, like this is the to number, that's the from, and that is so that we can match it to the client record. That is all that we're really doing there. Other than, of course, there's a great big list of assignments. So we're gonna assign first name, last name. We're going to capture the recording URL, the transcript, the date and time of the event, the campaign ID, prompt ID, etc. So I decided to put all these things in here: the SID, primary outcome achieved, the Air assigned call outcome. So we could do some comparison on that. So I just threw all of this stuff. It's going into the record. But yeah, really the difference between the two is what you use for to and from. So we just jump back here. We update the notes. So we drop in the notes. We drop the call notes, which is the summary. And so that's all available. Then we increment the call counter here. And that's saying, yep, we've gotten one received. Good to go. We remove it from any other calls workflow that might be over there, because the calls workflow's got two paths. One is leads API. The other one is the calls API. So I've got that built into that side so that we can mitigate any potential problems in the future and be able to call from both sides, leads or calls API. And then down here, these are just some flags. This one I've really questioned. I removed from Air calling flow. I'm just throwing that in. It's kind of an extra little piece that would prevent. I would rather prevent calling than over calling. So I'm putting an extra flag on this, and I'm having to manage it all over the place, but I still don't know my exact use case for this, and maybe it doesn't exist. I should, there should be some logic mapping kind of process, reduction process that I can go through, but I do have this extra one to tag it up just in case there's a situation where I want to block it. Yeah, but not really put it on the do not dial or do not call list, but just block it internally, an internal flag for that. And this one, call with Air, is how I initiate it. So you tag up a contact with call with Air, and it'll put it into the Air workflow to try to make calls. It'll make a call. All right, so one of the things that I missed was I originally had this flow going down here, and we're kind of breaking it up, and we're saying, okay, if it's human and it's less than or equal to 30 seconds, a lot of things happen on the front end of calls. They get dropped, they get, it's unclear, whatever it is. If it's less than 30 seconds, we wanted to call them again in a week. So the miss that I had was they could just get on there and say, don't call me. Do not call, put me on the do not call list. So that's important. If you're managing this in this way, is to look for and make sure you're being aggressive with that do not call list, because calling them multiple times is not going to be good if they've said, put me on the do not call list. So right here, this one, I'm looking at the Air, what Air tagged it as, and that one seems to be pretty good as far as the outcome. I've had some troubles with the other outcomes, but this one's pretty good. So did Air tag it as do not call? If they did, then I want to tag it internally. And Go High Level has got a do not dial. I think that's what that means. But it has it for the different categories if they've asked to unsubscribe from emails or the phone or the texting or whatever it is. This has the granularity to put that right into the contact. It's a built-in function, a data structure inside Go High Level. But I also want to stop the calling, which is stop. I've got two flags: stop Air calls and then remove from Air calling flow. So the remove from flow, I'm using it just kind of like saying, okay, let's pull it out of the flow. But this stop Air calls means I'm not planning. I don't want to call them anymore. It's not really do not dial, but there might be other situations. Lenny, right? If they kick off a Lenny script on me, then I want to I still want to waste my time calling that one anymore. It's not really do not dial. They didn't ask to be put on the list, but I'm just not going to call them anymore for this purpose. So that's why I've got these two statuses. Might be too much, a little early in the game, hard to say. So anyway, I take them out of the airflow, and then I remove them from the calling workflow. So the Air calls leads via API. So I'm going to remove them from the calling workflow. So anyhow, yeah, so I want to pull them out of that other workflow. And this case, where I've used in the leads API, I don't need to worry about that, because the leads API just fires it into one. It has one place where it actually makes an entry into the leads list. It stuffs a lead on the list. The other one, the workflow there is much longer because you're managing each call. It calls right when you say to call. So you've got to manage what Air is doing and do that in your own way. So I would want to remove them. If someone calls and they say, hey, do not call, I want to remove them from that workflow, and I also want to tag them up. So remove them and tag them, bag them and tag them. All right, so let's see their Air. And again, I use a technique here. I say, I'm looking for does not contain do not call. So if it's got different, do not call list, please do not call, any other versions of it, whatever it is, however it's put in there, this gives me a little bit of robustness to this detection. So there can be some variation, and I'm doing a substring search again, and that's basically what it's doing. All right, so determine at this point. Then I drop into here and it says, okay, we don't have any evidence of do not call. It's not tagged from Air, so I drop it in here and I say, okay, if it's a voicemail greater than 60 seconds, then I tag it for that. If it's a human that is less than or equal to 30 seconds, so this covers the bottom end of the times of the time possible times. So your call is going to be from 0 seconds. So let's say it's got to be 1 second long at least, up to some number. So this is picking the bottom of it, the shortest period of time. And we already know they're not do not call, so we can drop in here and start looking at. I didn't make good notes here. Let's see. I'll just put a note in here. How many times called? And basically, we're gonna be able to split based on that. We've got call count less than 6, so we'll put them back on the list. We're gonna pull them out of that sequence, whatever it is, and then delay for 7 days and tag them up and put them back in the call flow. So I'm handling that right here. I would normally separate this function out, but with this kind of an asynchronous way this works, I'm going to end up adding flags and stuff all over the place. So I am going to skip that and just put it. It's real simple right here, where I've got this sequence, and it's captured right there, and I can just park it on this thing for 7 days, versus go set up some other deal and drop it, message over to the calling routine and put it in there and have it parked in the calling routine, which would probably be, from an operational standpoint, it's a better architecture. Anyhow, so too many calls, tag and remove. So I'm right here going to remove them from being called again. And that's kind of the idea. Is at this point, I'm deciding to, they're not saying, hey, take me out. I'm going to remove them from call and put my own internal, do not call, so to speak, on them, because it's been too many calls. Now I might throw another tag on here that says, exceeded whatever. At this point, I'm saying 6 times. Yeah, it's less than 6. If it's equal to 6, then it drops out over here. If it's 6 or greater, basically. So we call them 5 times. If they've answered and again, it's falling into this category, whatever it is. It's still like this thing we're going to quit call on. And we'll probably discuss that or tweak and tune that a little bit more. The voicemail we tagged up. And then over here, we're going to go into our other process, and we're going to process the outcomes here and go break it out into all the different options that they could say that we're looking for based on the call script, including over there, I've got another do not call. So I'm going to run this is actually, I call it whatever, gold and silver, but it's really a ChatGPT process that's going over there now, and it's going to break it out and give a whole bunch of different options as to what's happening with this call, like what its outcome is, even allowing me to have 2, 3, or multiple outcomes, so I can detect different activities in the list. Anyhow, that is what is going on there. The big key takeaways are: make sure that we're checking this do not call and we're aggressive with that. I also have another do not call check over here where I'm using ChatGPT to analyze the script and determine the outcomes. And right here is that other one that is, I'm removing them from the flows when there's an error and we can't determine inbound and outbound call, because I'll make bad data by not properly mapping to the client. And if I do that, I could end up calling the same client again, and violating a do not call is another possibility, is a possibility there. So anyhow, just some thoughts on processing post-call outcome.